So 10.1, bell schedule and transportation routing optimization. So just so the public knows, what we have to do is call a motion for something, then we'll have the discussion, and then we will call the vote, just like everything else. So can I get a motion? Kevin, did you want to do a motion?
Point of order. Moving for either option A or B, we're going to have discussion prior to, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I move the board approve bell schedule and transportation routing option A.
Do I have a second? All right, we'll give that to Carolyn. Thank you. All right, and now, Brian, would you like to introduce Jeff?
Yeah, thank you so much. Joining us this evening to provide the bell schedule and transportation routing optimization presentation is our Chief Operations Officer, Mr. Jeff Connell. Jeff, welcome.
Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for giving me this, members of the board, public. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to come back and present to you the transportation routing optimization plan, and specifically giving you an opportunity to kind of hear some information on the parent and staff survey that was sent out, and present to you what is option A and B. Right, and option B, just to refamiliarize ourselves, basically takes option A and moves it 5 minutes back. So just kind of keep that perspective as we go. Thanks. Just a reminder again about our terms, in case I use any of these, any terms of art, you can refer back. We certainly try to keep it not too jargon heavy. The real important part of this is, why are we doing this, right? And these elements of our operation are real. The staffing challenges we have are significant. We've had a number of times where, when my director of transportation herself has had to get on a bus over half a dozen times this year. And not to be dire, but to be frank about this for our conversation. That means that was the absolute last person available to get on a bus and run a bus route. And these are people who are getting on a bus, whatever bus, and they're given a map, and they're told, these are your students, these are your stops, go get them. And that's not the best way to run a bus route system. But that's what we've been doing in order to keep our system running. The other piece of this that the superintendent mentioned earlier is the lack of structure for our bell times. This is, by and large, one of the main reasons we can't optimize our busing system and reduce the number of routes any further than we have, because unless we change those, we're kind of locked into this is as good as we can do. And we've had a national consultant review our bus route system, as well as our own staff routers, and this has been the lowest common denominator for us. This is what we need to change if we're going to reduce the number of routes and increase the flexibility. With that comes the other piece of this that we mentioned before, the financial stewardship. So there's two elements to this that end up happening, right? One is we run a lot more routes than ultimately we have to, and every route that we run, morning and afternoon, for the course of 1 year is about $80,000. The other piece of this is then all of the activities, field trips, music opportunities, certainly athletics, that we can't meet with internal drivers and buses is being performed by a charter company. The cost in the last year for us exceeded $400,000 of something that we really believe we can provide in-house if we have the right number of drivers available. This adds up to a significant savings that actually, under our budget constraints, we would like to experience now. We know that the timing of this kind of change is never ideal, but we're talking between $1 and $1.5 million that we can save in the 24-25 school year. As we look ahead, this is incremental change, right? There is more standardization of our bell times that we can do. We've looked at our neighboring districts quite closely, including some down in Denver, And I don't want to pick on or highlight any in particular, but I can tell you in neighboring districts, if you want to send your child to an elementary school, you can pick any time you want as long as it's 7:50. And in Boulder, that will get you to an elementary school. And this is what we see our neighboring districts doing so that they can optimize their transportation system and reduce the number of bus drivers they need so that they can keep their systems running. That's really important to us too, because we have not been short a route yet this year. That means a lot to us in the transportation department and what we value, so what we bring to this district. But it's in danger of any day not having enough. Our attrition rate is 30%. We train a lot of people, we license them with CDLs, we get them on the road, we give them experience, and they find great opportunity because of that. And so we are constantly in a license, train, recruit, develop, and then do it again. And that's okay, but it just means our system runs really lean. So we issued a survey in response to your questions from the last information session that we did. We are pleased with the number of participants. So just kind of quickly running through some of the, just the information on number of responses. 5,556 valid responses from parents, 720 from staff, 133 from community members, is really quite good. Breaking it down a little further then, 29% of those indicated that their children ride a bus to the school. We did see a difference in the respondents, right, versus those that are looking at this from merely a bell time shift versus those that see this as a bell time shift for a bus that they rely on to get their children to or from school. So looking at the aggregate, although it still bothers me that this is slightly reversed, option A is blue, but it's on the right, option B on the left. Be that as it may, it was fairly close. Option A was slightly favored. Remember, option B is simply moving option A 5 minutes back. But let's look a little bit more deeply at this. So of the feedback provided, trying to parse it down a little bit further is what we're trying to do here. Looking at those pieces of feedback that come from bus riders' responses and getting a representative group from each, 175 parents, elementary, 69 middle, 53 high school, and then a smattering of staff from the various schools as well, gave us this. So there's a couple of interesting things going on in this graph, and hopefully you've had the time to look at this. We see a few trends, right? We see that by and large, option A again, slightly favored, taking the average over the entire survey results, but noticing a few things. Middle schools do move earlier, and there was quite a few responses about the difficulty of that change on all of those reasons we've, superintendent mentioned earlier, jobs and families and other siblings, and, just the difficulty of managing that level of change. The other piece that was interesting about this is if we look at the parents of the high school and we look at staff at high school, the two larger blue bars with the short orange, they overwhelmingly favored option A. Even 5 minutes later, a lot of the feedback was that pushes our high schools even further back, even by 5 minutes, making all those things that high school students have in the afternoon even that much more difficult for them in terms of athletics, jobs, childcare, all the different things that they have going on, athletics every evening. So when we look at this, we see the balance, and we do see the weighing of interests, right? Quite a few parents in middle school liked option B better because even 5 minutes is important in the morning when you're rushing out the door. And we appreciate that. And for high school students, the same. Their interest more on, saving as much time as they can. So in the commentary data that we received, right, these were some of the themes that came out of those responses, right? The logistical issues, certainly first and foremost. The sleep and well-being of middle school students. One of the things that we would like to highlight now and again is we agree middle school students ideally would be in a later tier, right? We are not able to accomplish that level of change for this edition of bus route optimization. But if we do look deeper at standardizing our bell times, then middle schools would be moved, they would be moved back, almost decidedly so. And we would try to do much like other districts, standardize. We are geographically rather large. That's one consideration. So we may not be able to fully standardize as much as some others. However, elementary, high school, middle, and some blend of that is a standardization that we would like to move to. And so, although this is not ideal, it's something we would keep in mind for the future. The other piece, many comments about athletics and the difficulty of the high school start time and end time. Some comments about just the general logistical concerns, time on a bus, time of day, darkness, safety, security, those kind of things. And a number of comments about starting elementaries earlier actually being a benefit in terms of heat mitigation, right? Our buildings do heat up in the hot August afternoons. Finishing earlier can only help that situation. Looking at the high school start times, just wanted to kind of remind everybody of how we got here, right? There was a considerable amount of study and research done related to the adolescent benefits. In some ways, right, when we did the bus optimization, we prioritized keeping high school students to a later time. It wasn't our intent to revisit this. It was just to balance out those students that seemed to benefit from having that different circadian rhythm and sleep cycle. And so this was something that we tried to prioritize, again, for now. So looking, just at a graph, right, the one on your left, current, on the right then, proposed. Really the column to focus you on is the runs per tier, right? Remember, the highest number is the number of drivers I have to have on the road at any one time. And so the highest number of our current AM bell time is 122. The highest number for our proposed would be 106. And then in our afternoon routes, the highest number we had in the morning was, or in the current, in the afternoon was 115. That number would go down to 110. So kind of balancing between the two different graphs, that's 12 fewer routes running. That's $80,000 per route. And that's an increase in our ability to do all the athletics and events and music to a much greater extent. Maybe not as much as we would like to again, but to a much greater extent.
Jeff, thank you so much. I just want to ask a clarifying question for members of the community that are tuning in right now, for members of our board. If they're orienting themselves, excuse me, to this screen where it says proposed AM or PM bell times, can you just reiterate what option that was previously presented to the board?
Yeah, that was option A.
Thank you.
Yes, okay. I do have copies for the board if anybody wants to refamiliarize themselves with any specific school, just ask. Otherwise, that's all of the information that we have for you tonight. Is there any questions or concerns?
I think we
Just
will
in
have
case.
questions for sure. And actually, I just wanted, if we can, just before we get started, I would like to do this sort of in two parts, if that's okay with everybody. I'd like to go ahead and we can talk about, it was motion, the motion was passed for option A, so we can talk about that. And then I would like to go ahead and talk about setting up a charge for the superintendent and the cabinet as to what to look for in the following iterations. So, and I know that those things are very overlapping, so we may not separate them out quite so much. But I want you to be thinking about those two things as we have our conversation. That said, I don't know who would like to kick this off. So, anybody? Kevin?
I'll go first. First of all, thank you for the hard work that you both have done, and the level of detail and explanation that's come with this. I'd like to make 3 points, and then I'm glad you asked about the charge, because I do have a charge to leadership. My first main thought is that, to echo, I think, a sentiment you carried, Jeff, is that doing nothing is not an option. I would like very much that we didn't have this problem confronting our school district. I prefer not to have to vote on anything like this tonight, quite frankly. But that is a luxury that we don't enjoy, in my view, as a district, nor is time a commodity that we possess based on the information you presented, either financially or, more importantly for me right now, on a personnel level. Our why, I think, as you aptly articulated, at least for tonight, is that our bus drivers are struggling, meaning our people are struggling. And I, for one, insist that we take care of our own. We've gotten notes that our staff are overworked, they're understaffed, and we cannot attract additional candidates due to some of these constraints. And the result, unfortunately, to echo some of the direness of this situation, is that we may have to eliminate routes altogether if we keep going on this path. And what I've been told is that could mean blackouts. And that could mean days when we don't have transportation for students. In my view, and I'm speaking for myself only in this position, that is inexcusable. And let me be clear that while this does affect 30% of our family and students, and so that was some of the comments that we heard in community feedback, there are students in our district right now, to echo Superintendent Kingsley's comments, that rely on busing now to get to school. And so with all the things to consider and all the detail, where I come out is that if it's possible for a student in our district to not attend school because he or she or they don't have a busing or transportation, that's inexcusable to me, and that's as simple as it comes. As far as option A versus option B, and I wanted to make this point, I've made it to leadership and I want to make it for the community now. Looking at the data results, I noticed on slide 8, maybe if we can pull that back up, that middle school parents and teachers prefer option B over option A. And I wanted to highlight that. I think Jeff did a nice job of kind of explaining and doing the deep dive, and I appreciate that because I did too. And so where I come out is that since middle schools will be the most impacted by an earlier start time under option A, I believe their votes and the voices should carry more water. And of the two, I would prefer option B for that reason alone. And again, I've said this over and over again at board meetings, that I don't believe that fairness is giving everyone the same thing. It's giving everyone what they need. And we have clearly seen the data here that our middle school teachers, staff, and parents are asking for an additional 5 minutes. I think that's eminently reasonable. That said, and while I wish to elevate this subset of data, the majority of our community have responded that option A is the preferred option. And I must respect the community's wisdom in that regard. Final point on sort of explaining my vote is that I've read every single email and letter from the community that has come across my inbox on this subject, as I'm fairly certain most of the board and the leadership have as well. And so I appreciate and I commend you on giving us the opportunity to have this discussion with the public, because I think they deserve it. And quite frankly, I think that if this is something that's going to affect people's lives, then they ought to hear from their representatives to say why we're voting a certain way, and we can stand by that. And I will stand by my vote tonight. The hard thing is I agree with most of the comments that I've heard in these emails. It's hard when people make the exact points that I'm thinking about and I want to make. One comment that got my attention, again, while visiting one of our Title I schools here in the district, the feedback, interestingly, that I received from the school leader that came from their parent community was that above everything else, parents need consistency in their lives, especially people that are coming from two working households or individuals that are working multiple jobs for their kids. They need consistency. And so this vote also is hard, and so I think I need to articulate at least my own vote on this, because the whiplash effect that this is going to cause in our district, and we've already had this happen a few years ago, is considerable. And I heard from a teacher today saying that the amount of change that they have seen in this district in the last year and a half, 2 years, has been overwhelming, were their words. And so I want to note that, and I want to honor that. And so I'm not voting tonight in favor of option A in spite of these concerns. I share them. And so that leads to my next point, which is the charge to leadership that I've come up with. To lessen the effect of the whiplash effect that I just mentioned, if we're going to do this again for the next year, I have two things that I charge leadership with accomplishing, and my vote will be contingent upon these two things and the efforts that we make collectively as a team. The first, and I agree with this, we need a more standardized bell time for all grades. Part of the reason I believe that we're in this issue is that we have an unbelievable amount of start times and end times across the district, making this an absolute disaster for coordination and exacerbating this problem that's already bad. And so I would push to have a uniform start time for elementary, for middle school, and for high school that people can plan their lives around, that is semi-permanent, and that we can expect, regardless of the school of choice that we may go to, regardless of our neighborhood schools. There is but one start time and one finish time uniform. And I don't think in this society that should be as difficult to accomplish. But again, that may come from a place of ignorance. And secondly, and perhaps most importantly, if we're going to review busing and transportation again, and I appreciate Superintendent Kingsley's leadership on this issue, I implore that we allow the ability to have free transportation for students of need in the school choice setting. If we are committed to equity and inclusivity, then we need to put our money where our mouths are. And that means offering transportation to kids who can't afford transportation to their school of choice. We have a community of privilege, and the fact is that when parents and when parents and families opt to go to a different school, they know that they have to get their kid to and from that school, and they have the ability to do that. And that is not the luxury of every kid in our district. And so if we are intentional, if we're going to be committed to equity and inclusivity, that is a charge that I want to see accomplished when we do this the next time around. Last thing, I think, yep, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Who would like to follow that act?
I go to go.
Jess, thank you. Thanks, Kevin.
Mine won't wait as formal. Kevin, when I look at this slide again, the middle school teachers actually did not prefer B. And I know I would have, I think I assumed similarly and would have thought, and I think the middle school parents, it's not as drastic as I would have originally thought it would be, which I think is also why option A, because it's overwhelmingly preferred, which is a surprise to me, but nonetheless, is why I would vote for this. Similar to you, I want kids to all have access to school each and every day, and I want to put the best bus driver in front of them each and every day, and that's the one that they can see consistently. I have so many things. I agree that doing nothing is not an option. We have to do something, and I think one of the things that I keep coming back to is I think this shocks our system, our families, our students, our staff, because they haven't had to feel the repercussions the way transportation has. Transportation has done such an amazing job of covering that you just get it done and you take the brunt of all the challenges so that everyone in the system just gets to get to school and be well served. So I thank you for continuing to do that for our families. And as a middle school parent who will have to change, and as an elementary parent that will have one of the latest start times, so I will have the biggest spread, I will vote for this because it's good for all of our kids in the long run. I also share Kevin's charge that we need to actually have some serious boundaries on what is too early, what is too late for both starting and ending times, what is ideal for elementary, middle, and high school, what do they need. I charge us with not just doing that internal audit, but contacting our community, asking them what their thoughts are. We changed start times for high school years ago. Connect with our community and see how is that working. Is that still serving our students the way we intended it to? I hope it would, but also times have changed. A lot has changed. I echo that I was probably the most disliking of this plan originally. I think that's probably saying it mildly. And so I think to get to the point where I am willing to vote for it, I think says a lot of your leadership, your communication on why this is necessary, the students that we're serving. It goes so far beyond the amount that we save. It goes beyond the routes that we save. It goes beyond, helping bus drivers have a consistent route. It helps the entire team. I cannot say enough about the amount of communication you've provided to make this a vote that I could get on board with. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. Anyone else who would like to speak? Carolyn, go ahead.
I just want to ask a clarifying question for parents who might be watching. So suppose we did decide not to do anything and just hold the status quo for this year and then maybe just wait and do the changes next year. Tell me what some of the possible pitfalls are if we do that. Because I've heard people up here say doing nothing is not an option. So I think we need to articulate for people what the consequences would be of doing nothing. So we're all normed, we all understand what's going to happen.
Thanks. I think that one of the significant pitfalls is that buses and bus routes for students will, one morning, not have a bus driver available. And that becomes kind of a sudden, unexpected event, right? Once that happens more often, we may have to look to a system of rolling blackouts like Thompson has done, or we may have to make other choices about what schools or areas, walk zones. I mean, there's other implications that can be done to try to relieve how many bus routes are out there running. But it would mean substantial and hard change with no to little notice, because that's not something we can predict. So come November 2nd of this year and the next school year, we could all of a sudden find ourselves one day 3 bus drivers short. And that is going to be a dramatic event that we are trying to plan for now so that it doesn't happen then. And that's really important to us. And the other piece of this is the financial stewardship that comes with it. This is not an insignificant amount of money to try to save and improve service to our students and families. It comes with it the price of changing bell times. And that obviously that's our big concern about this, all the implications from that. But saving this amount of money, reducing the amount of money we spend on charters, optimizing our system so that we can continue to run with fewer bus drivers needed, so that our system can continue to run, is really what we are most at risk of not succeeding at.
Jeff, I want to thank you for your response there. And I'm grateful that Jeff led out, because the driver here is ensuring the continuity of service. And I want that to be unmistakable. But I think it's incredibly important for us as a community to name and recognize and reaffirm that our budget as a district in its current form is not at scale for the number of students that we serve. And it doesn't mean we're overspending, but we are investing in areas that we need to prioritize leadership practices that identify efficiencies, because in the event that we cannot leverage these savings, we must find those dollars somewhere else in the system to put our budget at scale and balance it moving into the system next year. That is not the driver. If we have to do that, we would do that. But I want to recognize identifying efficiencies and making sure that we're not losing service. This is about workplace conditions. This is about ensuring our mechanics and our supervisors and our director can play the role that they're in, knowing that those roles are mission critical to optimizing service. We also need to make sure that, as Director Havelda appropriately suggested that our parents need consistency. I know that we share a value that our employees need that too. Part of the context of the various change in optimizing and mobilizing these things all at once does create an element of fear across our community and our system. In fact, I've heard even from a bus driver recently that as a result of reduction of routes, is this a means of moving forward to privatizing our busing practices in the future? And I want to say directly to our transportation department, the answer to that question is no. We value you. We want to make your workplace conditions today better. We want you to find opportunities to work different shifts if that is something amenable to you. And we want to make sure that we find and create a joyful work environment where morale goes up, where we're not having a 30% attrition rate every single year. Those are the drivers, but it would be remiss if I didn't talk about the financial aspect of these challenges that we're facing too, which is another reason why our steering committee's work is so important, running parallel to this, as well as other efficiencies that are being gleaned both at the school level as well as the central office level in spirit and in service of balancing our budget moving into next year.
And if I can just add on to that too, I just want to point out that it's not only the workplace, that having a good workplace to be in, right? The transportation is a great place to work. It's not just bringing that. We want to do that, absolutely. And when we do that, what we're doing is we're bringing happy drivers to kids, and their kids are able to see that, and that is a significant portion of what it is that we are doing, right? This is the first person that they interact with on their school day, is they get to see the driver, and they know the driver. They know the driver's name. They can talk to them about maybe baseball or whatever it is. But if we are sending people to work who are extremely tired or unhappy or not knowing the route or not knowing the kids, that in and of itself is an equity issue, and it's something that we need to be looking at, because that's not a great way to send our kids off to school. You know, the very first interaction they have going to school is somebody who's grumpy because they don't know the route that they're doing. They don't know the kids. They don't know, okay, when I get back, I have to go to the next route because we're still missing drivers. That is affecting our students as well. So yes, it's about having a good workplace, a work environment, because that leads to a better environment for our kids. So I just wanted to throw that in there as well. Is there anybody else? Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I won't repeat what Kevin said and what Jessica said, but I'm in strong agreement with all of your comments, so thank you for those. One of the things I did want to say, though, was when we think about bus drivers, I really think they're some of the unsung heroes of our district. And then I got to thinking, well, how can I make their life better? How can the community make their life better? When you see a bus driver coming by, wave to them, give them a thumbs up. I mean, make them feel like they're doing something special, because they are. If they're driving your kids, go ahead and give them a gift card from time to time. Recognize them for the work that they do and make their job something special. I think that will help us with our retention of bus drivers. That's it.
Thank you, Jim. Connor, did you want to go? Or Scott?
Just, I've got a couple of things, but just on the financial portion of it. I know the transportation department is going to do everything they can to materialize these cost savings. But in the nature of cost savings, it takes more than 1 year to realize them. I will be flabbergasted and extremely proud of the transportation department if you can even get half of the cost savings that you're proposing. And the reason for that is normally it takes a while for those cost savings to actually kick in. We will still have kids on charter buses next year. Option A or option B, we will. So the $400,000 that is in that bucket is already going to be, is going to be less. A question, so I haven't heard concretely, why can't we just right now make the big change that we're talking about making in 12 to 18 months? 8 o'clock, 8:30, 9 o'clock. Why can't we do that for for next school year, 24-25, instead of 25-26? Is there a specific reason for that?
I think, that would be ideal. As a logistical matter, that would be a significant change to the system, right? So we would engage with a consultant and we would do that routing. And, some of the comments that I heard tonight about community involvement and some of those other pieces, we would want to make sure is robust and present. There's no specific practical reason we couldn't do the big change quickly, right? There are issues with choice of schools, parents choosing based on start times, these kind of things. I think the other big piece is the equity piece that Kevin first brought out here tonight, is that part of what we hope to do when we do a more substantive standardization of our bell times is to create the option for choice busing. That is going to take more time, because those students to this date have not been routed onto a bus. And so they are more scattered because they don't sit within a school's boundary. And that's going to take more for us to accomplish than we can do between now and August. That's probably the biggest practical limitation, other than communication and some of those others.
If it's okay, thank you, Jeff. And a piece that I'd like to add to that, and check my math, Jeff, but I believe with option A in its current form, 58% of our portfolio of schools are not impacted. And I think that's really, really important, using the context that I know all of you have heard, but Director Havelda elevated that, it is not uncommon as we're engaging with staff members to talk about the level of change that people are experiencing right now being overwhelming. And I know multiple changes doesn't build confidence either, but creating efficiencies where we recognize it, that's true transformative change that I believe that we can get to for 25-26. I'm grateful for the specific and explicit charge that many of you, if not all of you, and I know I haven't heard yet from all of the board members, are providing. I believe we can do that work and meet the demands that are being challenged or charged to us by our families through the survey that we provided. But in the context of everything that we've experienced as a school district community, through our long-range planning efforts starting in the fall, the great work of our steering committee, I think really being mindful of the level of tolerance of change people can experience right now is another part of the reason why, as we're talking about this, we believe that this is the best place to start, but understand the healthy push that you're providing and respect to.
I just think that the amount of change, and we also have to take into context that 3 years ago we changed. Right? And we had great concrete reasons for changing 3 years ago. That put undue pressure on the transportation department then. We had great reasons, concrete reasons for doing that. I haven't seen one concrete piece of data about whether that was effective or not for our children. Right? So now we're going to change this here and say, hey, this is going to be great for our transportation department. We may get cost savings, but then even before we can collect any of the data, we're going to make the real change that needs to happen as it pertains to bell times and transportation. Right? I think something, and Jeff and Desiree, this is not an indictment of the work that you've done or whatever, especially as it pertains to the survey. Option 3 is an option. It just wasn't presented to the community. Right? We could have said in that very survey, we can hold the transportation department as it is, but everybody in the community needs to know that you are running the risk of a rolling blackout. Or we could have said a myriad of options for that. What ends up with this survey is it front runs the authority of the board. And we as board members need to take that into account. We came to the community and said, hey, look, you're either getting chocolate or vanilla, but you're going to have some ice cream, okay? Instead of saying, hey, you don't have to have ice cream, but what you might not get is ice cream ever again, right? That undercuts us and our decision-making ability and the confidence in the community, in the board. I hear time and time again, you guys are going to change bell times again? Why? Please don't change the bell times again. And this isn't from survey people. This is from other leaders in the community. Not to mention, I think that students first, right? Students first is important. And yes, it is very important to have a nice face on the bus, right? But it's also important to have a teacher who's ready to teach, right? We're impacting some of the other employees in the district with changing these times, right? Not to mention, I don't know many teenagers getting up an extra half hour early who are bright and ready to go either, right? So I don't think that if we just narrow it all down to just the transportation department and make our decision without being cognizant of the unintended consequences to other stakeholders, our paraprofessionals, our teachers, our parents, everybody, that we do a disservice to ourselves as a board in doing that, and we also impact the students. Last but not least, and I said this at the last meeting, I understand the equity argument. I really do, and I don't want my comments to say that I disregard them. But if we continue to boil every decision down to equity, we therefore do a disservice to issues of real equity. This is an issue of not being able to get and retain bus drivers. I said last meeting, if we have 20 more bus drivers, this problem goes away, right? And we could create a plan on how we're going to do that and retain bus drivers. I think that if we sit there and we say always, well, it's an equity issue, it's an equity issue, it's an equity issue, then when we have really hard issues of equity, such as transportation going forward in school of choice, I see that as a big equity issue. But if we say that issue is now, we subsequently dilute all of those issues in the future. I won't be supporting either of the options. I just don't think the community can take it. I think they're losing confidence in the board. I think flip-flopping back and forth on school times, again, is a major disruption to our community and our staff. And we're going to do it again. We're going to do it even bigger and harder next time around. Jeff and Desiree, I think you've done a great job. I think the transportation department for the last 5 years has done an incredible job. A charge, if you could just hold it together for one more year, that would be incredible. I know that's extremely hard and putting undue pressure on you, but if you guys could do that, that would be incredible, because real change is coming.
Go ahead, Scott.
I think Connor said a lot of thoughts I've had actually brought in more things, so I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody's comments. This is one of those issues. I've talked to a lot of you individually. I have grappled with tremendously. I've gone back and forth since we started talking about this in January, and the work that PSD staff has put into this, it's a lot of hours. I greatly value our classified staff. Desiree, I baked, how many, I don't know, 120 cookies and brought them over during Classified Appreciation Week for the bus drivers. So I am a big fan. My father-in-law was a bus driver in his retirement. My first take on this was the impact on the community, parents and employers. I'm a small business general manager. So changes to schedules when I got to drop my kid off, when I need to leave to pick them up, deeply impact our function. We're a small business. I can't imagine some factories and other big businesses. To do that 2 years in a row, to disrupt those schedules of parents and kids, really is troubling to me. I think that inconsistency, where we're rearranging schedules. We already did this, I think it was 5 years ago. I think it was 2018 is when that was discussed. And it was a big deal at the time. We were on DAB, Jess, you and I, when that was talked about, and the mental health impacts were really a big deal, especially for the high school kids But middle schoolers, my kids were in both middle school and high school and absolutely loved the changes that they went to at that time. But to do it again and ask those parents and employers to make changes, that was my number one thing. But then I got, and this is just a few, these are the pages of emails, some 2-3 pages long, people passionate about this. They didn't have to take their time to write that. That means a lot. And it's not just, hey, we're going to listen to 5 or 6 people. They're representing a ton of people that didn't have the time to write these emails. But here are some of the things that I got that, I can't articulate, but they have. The mental health impact on middle schoolers. People from DAB came back to me and Jess and reminded us of all the studies, and I'm glad you brought that up. That's definitely fair to bring that up, and I appreciate you showing all the different perspectives. But there have been scientific study after scientific study talking about the impact on teenage brains on not getting enough sleep, and to ask our middle schoolers to go in at 7:30 in the morning or 6:30 in the morning when they have 0 hour. They have to go in. My kid was in band and jazz band. Those are those times that they would go into Weber that hour before school started, and that's brutal. That means kids are just going to opt out. They're not going to do those enrichment type of activities that maybe they would have and should have and could benefit from. So that's a big concern. School choice parents, they've already picked where they want to go based off of these times. If we change them now, that could disrupt plans they've already made for childcare and with work. Last school board meeting we had, an elementary school kid, that really touched me, that got me all quaky in terms of my decision, and in terms of, hey, they have to now stay later in the hot day. Same with the teachers. Before and after school activities, I already talked about that. Even coaches, getting coaches to those middle schools that much earlier, they have to leave their work at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then the biggest thing for me is I feel like this is going to exacerbate many of the problems that PSD has right now. I think we're going to suffer some enrollment changes. People may say, hey, I'm going to take my kid out and send them to a charter school that has a different schedule. Attendance. I think we're going to struggle with attendance at middle school or at least tardiness. That's going to be a major problem. It's going to disrupt the teachers' ability to teach their classes or get them started. And then even employee retention. Like you were saying, Connor, it's going to affect staff all over the board. So to me, we're impacting 30,000 students. 2/3 of those parents are already driving their kids to school. So the vast majority are doing that. We're doing this for 1 year. Now, if we could find a way to do it next year and beyond and keep it, and I think the way to do that is with the standardized bell times now. If we can figure it out and implement it, we get the cost savings, we remove that inconsistency, that disruptive nature of changing schedules. If we can do that now, find a way. And I agree, we do want to address the choice schools, but that's not something that's even in place right now. So people won't be upset if we don't get that fit in on this round. But if we standardize bell times now, we get the cost savings and all the other benefits, and it's consistent no matter which schools are closed, right? If we consolidate schools, that doesn't change anything. It's elementary school starts at this time, middle school starts here, and high school starts there. So I would say, instead of, you got to think about it from an organizational standpoint. If my business is struggling to provide the services to my customers, I can't ask the customers to just lower their expectations or change their expectations. I need to fix it. And I think we can do better at retaining and recruiting. And some of the ideas, and I'm sure you've talked about this, but I think we can really push this, are incentive bonuses for people that we have trained to stay. If you stay a year, you get $1,000. They're doing this, or $5,000, whatever it works out to be. We're talking about 12 routes or 20 routes that could fix this problem. It's not that much money in the short term. The other thing is attendance. Maybe that's a stipulation of this bonus. You get, if you stay a year and you're at 95% attendance, you get your bonus. That's how people are retaining drivers. And so I think for 12 to 20 people on that side, it's better to really focus our resources and attention on that than affecting 30,000 people for 1 year on this side. And so that's all I have to say. It's a incredibly tough thing. I know we're in a financial, we're struggling with some of the financial stuff, but I think we can find a way to really focus on the kids and the staff and retention and keep things rolling. But I do value everything you guys have put into it, but I'm also going to be a no on either option. I wish we could have a third choice of standardized bell times or don't do nothing. So that's all I have to say.
Madam President, quickly, point of order, is it possible to table this action item for 2 weeks to develop what it would take? Or are you
Not-
looking for a straight vote on this for an implementation in the 24-25 school year?
So because there's been a motion on the table for voting for A, we need to take the vote. If A were to not pass, then there could be a motion for tabling it. Carolyn, did you have a?
And there could also be an amendment to the motion too, right?
There could be,
We consult with Autumn.
I'm sorry?
I just wanted to consult with Autumn.
Under Robert's Rules of Order, there could be a motion to amend the current motion that's on the table, or there's also some options for tabling a motion that is currently before the board, if the board so chooses, to either table it or move to postpone to a different time.
Kevin?
And I believe, Madam Council, that would require an additional vote of the board, correct, to even do that procedural vehicle?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Carolyn, go ahead.
So this is quite the conundrum, right? I mean, I think we all agree we can't do nothing. I think I've heard from everybody up here, something needs to be done, right? Connor, I hear you say, yeah, let's standardize the bell times, but let's not do it twice here. Let's not do it this year, and if we're going to do it all at once. Is that what I'm hearing you say? And then
Essentially,
so,
yeah.
and then I'm kind of hearing the same thing from you, Scott. You don't object to the change, but if we're going to do it, let's do it all at once. Whether it's next year or the year after, let's only do it once is what I'm kind of starting to hear from you two guys. And I can't say that I disagree with that, I mean, because change once sounds a lot better. Standardized start times, like what you said, like 8:39, everybody knows, when they start, when you're in grade school, you start at 8. When you go to middle school, it's 8:30, and when you're at high school, it's 9. That gives a lot of predictability, and I find that really attractive, and I think our parents might find that really attractive too, right? And only changing once might be really great. And you brought up something about not getting an option C. I don't know if it was you or Scott who said that, and I can remember one time voting on something a few years ago, and they brought the presentation to the board, and it was one thing. It was, you can do this. You can bury the pipe next to the middle school. And I said, well, what if we don't bury the pipe? What if we just put a fence around the ditch? And somebody said to me, well, we didn't consider that. And I remember that really, really upset me, because even if it didn't seem feasible, it was probably something that should have been brought forward, right? For at least some consideration. So I do hear what you're saying, right? It's like, maybe we should have had a third option on there, which said, do nothing and risk rolling blackouts, right? Risk your kid not getting to school, so parents could know what the alternative was. Or, hey, next year we're going to do this really heavy lift, right? And we are going to standardize everything. Your kids, if it's in grade school, it's going to start at 8. If your kid's in middle school, you're going to start at 8:30. So that's your only choice. So maybe that third or fourth option should have been thrown out there. And so I hear your argument. And then on the other hand, you know, I heard what Kevin had to say here about like, should we do this now because we have financial considerations? Should we do this now because we're going to save some routes and we might take some stress off of the bus system? And so I guess I'm still kind of like torn about this. I would have said coming in here tonight, I would vote on A, you know, and I still feel like A is a really good option. But I think I'd like us to have some more conversation about this if we can.
So if I may respond to this, here's the conundrum that we throw into if we were to postpone this, right? So if you say, okay, we're going to talk about doing one big change after consolidation, so that means doing nothing at the moment. That means we lose the 1.5 or the 1 to 1.5 million savings. It means that we run the risk of rolling blackouts. It means that there is a very good chance that suddenly we are having this conversation, but we're having it as an immediate need because tomorrow we are going to have the same problem we had today, which is we are 5 routes short. How do we make that happen? What do we do about that? And then we're doing it on the backs of kids because those kids are not getting to school. One of the things that I talked to Melanie Merjois at Riffenberg today was if we go to rolling blackouts, she can tell you that she will lose about 15 students from her kindergarten classes every 8th day. They will not be in school because they do not have another way to get to school. So there is repercussions for this. If we don't do something, you know, there is a third option. You are correct about that. We can do nothing. But that does not come without consequences as well. And so we need to be thinking about what those consequences may look like, not only for, the transportation system and our budgets, but what does it look like for those kids? And what it looks like for a lot of those kids is they don't end up going to school. And that is a problem. That is something that we as a school board should be extremely concerned about. I mean, I agree with you, Scott, that we could have attendance and tardiness problems in middle school, but I will take that over every 8th day, not having 15 kindergartners in Riffenberg. So that's the problem that we're wrestling with. Change is hard, and I understand that we are asking for a lot of change in the next year from our community, from our staff, from cabinet, from us. This is hard work, y'all. This is what we're here for. And we have been provided with, people who have given us good feedback. You know, I had down here, option A versus option B with the middle school parents. It was only 26 parents versus 32 parents, as far as A versus B. The difference, though, between the 6 parents who have opted for A over B versus the parents who didn't even have time to take the survey because they're working their second job, and without the school bus, what are they going to do? When we're talking about equity, you're right, Connor, like everything is about equity. And equity means getting people what they need when they need it. So we have to be able to provide that for all of our students, not just the students who have the privilege of being driven to school, not just the students who have the privilege of going to a choice school. For every student, we have to be able to provide an equitable way for them to not only get to school, but then be at school as a whole person. So we do have options. We can kick this can down the road. We can, say do nothing. I personally will be voting for A on this. It is one of the things that, as the public said, we will take this. I understand that this is a bitter pill to swallow as far as change and then change again. But I have questions about, if we were to do it all at once, even if we say, okay, we could do it all at once for next year. What does that look like? We'd have zero community engagement for that. And, here we are talking about elementary starts at 8, middle school starts at 8:30, and high school starts at 9. I guarantee you, if you ask the high schoolers, they want to start at 8:30, and the middle schoolers don't want to start at 9. But we don't know that. We'd have to ask them. There's a time limit here too for us to be able to do this. And so I want to just really have people, there's not a good answer. The answer is, it's not good. But there are better answers that we cannot push off the good to wait for the perfect. That will hurt kids. And that's what we are here to do, is just make sure that those kids get to school. Kevin?
I just want to say, very well said, Madam President, and to reiterate 2 points that you made, I think, that are worth repeating. And Director Duffy, your arguments are articulate and eloquent and convincing, and had me second-guessing my own positions on this dais. But where I come out, and I want to highlight this, is if we offered a third option to the community, overwhelmingly, my belief would be the majority would still drown out that option A or B, and those voices get lost that need access the most. And the second point that's related to that, which I want to elevate, and I think is an excellent one, Madam President, is that equity is not a pick or choose based on the situation we're in. Equity, if we're serious about the business, needs to be a lens through which we examine everything. And some of the things that are confronting this school district are not easy problems. They are very challenging problems, and there is not a perfect solution to any of this. I don't like option A, quite frankly. I don't like option B. I don't like starting school at 7:30. I think that's too early. And I want to make that very clear, unequivocally on the record. I don't like starting school at 7:30. 7:45 is already too hard for my family. But given the options of having kids not come to school in our school district is something that I can't in good conscience vote against. So I just want to amplify those 2 points because I think they were very good. Thank you.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I love this conversation. I'm glad we're having this. Kind of the first time we've had like a real debate in public, so it's awesome. I hear everything that you guys are saying. I think this is the hardest thing that we grappled with. I don't think the third option is do nothing. What I'm advocating for is the standardized bell times next year. Again, we save the money. We keep the health benefits for our middle schoolers and high schoolers, but we need time to figure that out. We have right now, I just did a little Googling, we have 23 weeks until school starts. I think we as a district can figure out how to get 12 to 20 bus drivers secured, if that's what we need to do to get through the rest of this year or be prepared for next year. I think we can come up with incentive plans and training during that time to get ramped up. Or if we do standardize bell times, we have time to get surveys done with people to make sure. The thing is we already have proven data from the other school districts neighboring us that parents accept this. This is just the general way school is done in Colorado, and it would be different for us, for sure, and it would probably lead to a lot of feedback. But I think the inconsistency, the disruptiveness, we're really focused so much on the small amount of anecdotal evidence that we're not focusing on the big picture. And I feel that emotional pull of we don't want a kid or any blackouts or things like that. I think that scared everybody when Thompson did that. And I don't think we're there yet because you guys are doing great yeoman's work. But I don't know how long, what our runway is to get to that. So I would like to know more. I'd really like to study the standardized bell times. I would ask for a 2-week delay or shorter, whatever. We can do a special session. I don't know. But that would be my take on this is let's really think about it before we make a giant leap tonight.
Jess was first and then Carolyn.
So just to combat the standardized time, our goal might be 8:30, 9. But there are many districts who do have standardized times, but they might be 7, 7:30, 8, right? So there's no guarantee that even if we standardize, we're going to get the ideal that we want.
Hey, Carolyn.
So I just, as a former employer, as a former professional driver myself, as a former employer of drivers myself, I will tell you that it is not easy to hire a driver. CDL drivers are like unicorns. They're like gold. You know, it's like finding gold. And so I don't want to minimize how hard it is to hire and train a CDL driver. That is a huge lift. We heard Jeff talk about 30% attrition. Like, there is churn all the time. You're hiring and training all the time. Even when you hire and train, I don't know how many people are washing out of your classes, but anybody in here who works in HR and hires people and brings people in for interviews and hires them, and they don't show up for the first day of training, right? They just don't show up. And you've already invested a lot of time into somebody who doesn't even show up. So everybody needs to get their heads wrapped around that. There aren't drivers out there. There's no magic bullet for getting those employees. It's just hard work. And you just have to hope that you get the unicorn. You get somebody who really likes kids and really wants to do this work. It's like hiring paras. You know, it's hard work. We're asking people to do huge things, great things for a little bit of pay. It's super hard. And so I don't want to minimize that in public or to you guys, that I think that it's easy, you just have to hire more drivers. I don't believe that's ever going to happen, right? It's not in our current situation. It's not going to happen. So, but one thing I am curious about is, could we do the big change next year? Could we do the standardized start times next year? Could we go big? I'm getting curious about that. I really think it is important for us to optimize our routes and to optimize our start times. I'm getting more intrigued as I'm kind of listening to people talk about it. Is that doable for next year? I mean, really, could it be doable? I mean, it sounds like a heavy lift, but we're already suggesting this. Could we pivot? Is that realistic, do you think, Brian?
I really appreciate the question, and you know, this is going to be the first of a multitude of incredibly difficult, complex decisions you're going to be asked to make. And I don't envy you, and I don't envy us. And I honestly, that's the sentiment I get most in the community as I have a chance to speak with people, walk in Old Town. It's the first thing normally people say is, I don't envy the position that you're in. And it's not going to get easier, it's going to get more complex. You know, we as a leadership team, and those of you who were here from the moment when I was hired, you know, it is our aspiration to seek a win-win scenario every time we can find one. It really, truly is. I know it might not feel that way, but it is our aspiration to identify the scenario where it is a win-win. And the challenges that we're in, the trade-off here is we create some stability for a year, but what's happening with the context of what's happening in the department, our ability to secure and truly say that we're going to commit to providing all of our students, our 9,000 bus riders, services every day, we can't make that brand promise anymore. It's just a fact. It's a hard truth that our community is just starting to get their head their head around. And I share with you, you know, I'm learning as a superintendent, not just leading. And I've learned a lot this year going through the long-range planning effort around the level of engagement that this community expects and demands and deserves when we're making transformative decisions. So much so where we stopped a very hard decision that we were about to make in the fall to give more time for community engagement. Where we are in the academic school year, and this is not your fault. This is not to put pressure on you to make a decision or else, and I know it might feel that way. But the reality is that we're about to go into spring break. Normally, our master scheduling for the following year is done by March 1st. There are schools across the system today that are in limbo about fine-tuning adjustments that they're looking to make and not sure of how it's going to play out because they don't know what their bell times are going to be. It impacts school choice and choices that families made a while ago, and recognizing what does this mean for them on the back end of that. Many of the people who are at our schools who run these scenarios of managing these changes, from our principals, our counselors, our registrars, they're not all 12-month employees. And so I don't say that to pressure you. I say it to recognize that we have, in good faith, in partnership with you in this community, have brought this item to the board. Now, I believe this is the third item. We've discussed it now twice. I think that was appropriate to delay. And we're in a space that we have to recognize if we choose to delay this, there are implications at the school for this school year in our planning in service of next year. And I'm worried about the message, and I share this with you, it's not going to get easier. I say that with a humble heart. It's going to get harder. Myself, the staff, nobody wants to make multiple changes. I crave stability as much as you do, our families and our staff. And to be in these spaces, these are real problems that deserve real solutions, and there's not an easy solution out there. We have provided a multitude of hiring bonuses, training efforts for bus drivers. Our 30% attrition rate is still very real. Within this past year, I have called every single bus driver that has left this system, personally, me, as the superintendent, to ask them to come back to work with us. What would it take for you to stay? Can you consider your retirement another year out? The personal touch points that are happening in HR and transportation, I've never seen anything like it because of the problem that we're having. And for our community that has been paying attention to the great journalism of the Coloradoan that illuminated this incredible Amazon facility that's opening up 20 miles south of us in the next 2 years, our problems are going to get even more complex as a workforce. I don't say that to scare us. I say it to just speak truth in this reality. And so I do not believe it is attainable in good conscience for us to engage the community thoughtfully, knowing that moving to distinct bell times at each level, I share that aspiration too. But I believe it will require a deep level of community engagement, knowing 100% of our schools will be impacted by that. And to do that thoughtfully in partnership with people, I do not believe we have enough runway between now and the end of the year to have a level of clarity and direction for our staff to pull that off next year. If I felt that there was an opportunity to do that, I would recommend that we delay this conversation and continue to have it. But I do believe we are at a space where we're out of time. And I don't say that to put pressure on any of you. It is a very, very difficult position that all of you are in. But we are 2 years away to be able to achieve the direction that you are providing staff and myself. But I really do appreciate the level of clarity and the debate that is happening. This is good governance, in my opinion.
Thank you. And yeah, just a moment. I just wanted to follow up on that because I do want people to understand that we have been offering incentives for people to stay. It's actually been 3 months. So if you stayed for 3 months, you got an incentive to stay. And I think, Dave, you can maybe clarify how much that, I don't know if it matters how much that was, but there have been incentives out there for people to stay, incentives to come in and get your CDL, and that's for us to train them. And those have been going on for years, and for years consistently, we have not been able to find the drivers, and we have not been able to keep the drivers that we have. So, yeah, so it's just, it's as Carolyn spoke to, it is incredibly difficult, particularly in northern Colorado. I don't know why, but in northern Colorado to get and to retain drivers here. So there is that. And, there was the question of, or the statement that the transportation has done a wonderful job. And so we just ask you to keep it together for the next year. And here's the thing is they were one person away from canceling a route. One person. What happened if Desiree had been sick that day and could not drive because she was ill? What happens when a couple of drivers get COVID? What happens when, there's all those what ifs. And normally I am not a what if or a what about this kind of thinker. In this case, the what if Desiree were sick that day, we would be having a conversation about what do we do the next time this happens? And how do we make sure that those kids still get to school? Because what we would have had would have been 3 routes for one driver, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but 3 routes for that one driver, that those kids would not have gotten to school. How do we get in touch with the parents? Well, every person who works in the transportation department is driving. Who's calling the parents to say, hey, by the way, your bus isn't coming today. So your kids who are standing outside at the bus stop waiting for the bus are going to be there all day. You better bring them back in. How do we make sure that that does not happen? So this is what I'm looking at here. Me personally, I see this as this is a stop the bleed, right? We have been lucky enough not to have a bleed out situation. And we are able to hopefully get some prep in there. I don't want to have this conversation when we are looking for bandages. That is not where I want to go with this. I want to make sure that we are ready and able to make sure that all of those kids get what they need. And, as far as talking about getting the tiered options for the schools, I 100% agree. I think that should be part of our charge. And I think we absolutely need to get the community's engagement on that, because I might think that 8 is too late. You might think 7:30 is too early. You might think that a great start time is 9 o'clock across the board. Everybody's going to have their different opinion. And I think that it's very, very important that we get the community's input on this. And we may even hear that we like the different times. Yes, other schools do a set time, but we have people who like having that, well, I can choice into the school because it fits with my time better. So I do think we need to make sure we get that robust conversation happening with the community. I mean, we did not do that in November, and it was painful. So I feel like if we rush into this to do this again without that robust community input, that's gonna be a painful experience for everyone, not just the board, but the community. And I want to avoid having that painful experience for the community. So it comes back to the fact that option C is do nothing, which puts all of this in jeopardy. Because we don't have the time, the runway, the ability to get robust community engagement to do what it is that we want to charge. And if we go ahead, I think, I have a lot of things written down here about we need standardization for all grades. We need, and we need and expect it to be semi-permanent, so that, when we do this, we're in it, right? We're in it to win it on that one. We need to make sure that we can get to that point where we're getting those students transportation for choice schools. Because right now that is a privilege that only the people who can drive their students to a choice school have. And so, and that is a huge equity issue. We need to discuss what's too early to start, what's too late to start, what's too early to end, what's too late to end. Those are all discussions that we need to have. And as I go down this list, I think, my gosh, how could we possibly have this as a robust community engagement and have it done by the end of March, which is when they would need to go ahead and start doing their bell times. And even that would be a month late for them. And, when you're talking about a small elementary school, that's stressful. When you're talking about a comprehensive high school, I don't even know how that would happen. I just don't even know. So my take on this is that we need to go ahead and vote on this one and not delay the discussion, not delay the vote, and make sure that we have a solid charge to leadership, so that when we make this change again, that it is a permanent, well thought out, well executed, and available, equitable, available to every child. So that to me is what we need to be doing tonight. Kevin,
So
did you-
I was,
Okay.
a couple things on that. Whenever we get to the decision of set bell times, which may or may not be tonight, it's gotta stay. right? If we come back and we go to this issue again in 2 years, then we all shouldn't be on this board, period. And I'm serious about that. We are running through the trust of the community on this very issue because we keep flip-flopping back and forth, right? And I know I laugh about it and joke about it, but that's serious. The other thing is, the decision before us tonight is detrimental. Taking this decision tonight is detrimental to taking the next decision in the future. And the reason for that is I agree in robust communication with the community and getting their input. But we've been going back to them time and time again for input, and then we go ahead and we just make these decisions, right? At some point, they say to themselves, here we go again. Why should I even put in input? They're going to do what they want, right? So I think that hashing out, because this decision is so important, hashing out a third option that it seems to me we all kind of agree on, that we're going to be doing something that is more optimal to bell times in the near future. Hashing out that option very quickly. And it doesn't have to be surveys with the community, just even seeing if we could feasibly do it within 2 weeks. And if it's not, it's not. And then we come back and we vote on these options. I mean, if I can't have a bell time that is going to be put in place and stayed, then I don't see why we're changing it. I just don't. And I know, Jeff, that again, it's not an indictment of your department because you guys are doing an awesome job. But if Desiree doesn't show up to work, yes, some kids are at the bus stop, but the sky doesn't fall, okay? We scramble and we get those children picked up and to school. Be it late, yes. And we do our very best each and every time to get them there. It's not as if we have one issue in the transportation department and then every bus runs out of gas right there on the side of the road and nobody gets to school. Right? It's not that dire. There has been times that my children have been at school where there's been an issue with the bus. The bus breaks down, there's traffic, the crossing gates don't go up, and the kids get to school late. Right? That's part of it, right? And I think parents are flexible with that. Now, I'll give you, if this is something that happens recurring all the time, and I want the community to know that's a possibility, and I don't want to discount that at all, right? That is, if that's something, then yes, we have to make a different decision. But Jeff and his department have been doing a wonderful job keeping it together for 5 years, right? Just one more year, just limp it over the line, and we'll make the hard decision.
Just a couple of points of order. I want to make sure another director doesn't have another motion to amend, because I'd like to make a motion to call the question at this point. However, one response is that I do think we can make some semi-permanent changes based on the language of the next proposal by including supermajority language instead of an up-down vote to change bell schedules in the future. I think that might be prudent. We don't have to decide that tonight, but I would, unless there's a motion from the other directors to amend what we're going to do, I'd make a motion to call the question.
Madam President, I'd like to
Yes.
make a motion to make an amendment.
Okay. So, yeah, I was saying, so we need you to, so.
I'd
actually,
like to make a
Autumn,
motion
yeah.
to amend 10.1 action item. In the original motion, it was to move the board approve bell schedule and transportation routing option A. I would also like the amendment on that is to take an amendment to table the discussion for 2 weeks to explore whether or not an option B is viable.
Okay. Do I have a second? Scott's a second. All right. In this case, are there any questions about dates or anything like that? That's what we can discuss at this point, right? Is dates to do that?
Yes.
So just to clarify, you're talking about for a next board meeting to bring it?
Correct, for the next
Okay.
board meeting.
Okay, excellent. Jill, can you call the vote?
Jim Brokish,
No.
Kristen Draper,
No.
Connor Duffy,
Yes.
Kevin Havelda,
Nay.
Carolyn Reed,
No, no.
Scott Schoenbauer,
Yes.
Jessica Zamora.
No.
Apologies. Motion fails, 5-2.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you. And so now we can call the question.
Yep, I move to call the question.
Second? All right, Jessica. And so Jill, can you call the vote? And just as a reminder, can we just have a reminder as to what now the vote is for, just so we are clear?
I believe, Madam President, point of order, I think the original motion that I made a while ago was moved that the board approved bill schedule and transportation routing option A, was the original question.
Thank you. Okay, Jill, can you call the vote?
Jim Brokish,
Aye.
Kristen Draper,
Aye.
Connor Duffy,
No.
Kevin Havelda,
Aye.
Carolyn Reed,
Aye.
Scott Schoenbauer,
No.
Jessica Zamora.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-2.
Thank you very much, Jill. And before we move on to the next item, I just want to thank everybody here for a robust, hearty, vibrant conversation. These are not typically what we have had in the past, and I, for one, just love it, and I think it's excellent for the community to see just how this goes and how, at some level, how the sausage is made. So thank you all for participating in such a robust conversation. Thank you for allowing this. Jeff and Desiree, thank you so much for all the work that you have put into this, for putting out the survey. To those community members who filled out the survey, thank you. We appreciate that so much. And I just, hopefully you can go now and enjoy your spring break. Thank you. Yes.
Just one last thing. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate everything you put into this. Just so I can get this on public record, I would suggest, this would be a charge to you guys. I have a candidate in mind to be a bus driver. That is Nate Donovan. And I think he would
Like
be
to second.
great. He's got a CDL and lots of experience, and he is free right now.
Thank you for volunteering him to come over here and do that. We appreciate it.